the little girl noticed something terrifying on the plane. The massive propeller, high up at 10,000 meters, collided with a flock of birds. The plane, now engulfed in flames, had its engine rapidly breaking apart. As the alarm blared, all the passengers inside the cabin quickly fastened their seatbelts. But before everyone could react, a piece of debris from the engine pierced through the aircraft's cabin. Due to the immense pressure inside the cabin wall instantly cracked open. The immense suction force directly pulled passengers out of the cabin. A man, struggling to keep control of his body, desperately grasped onto the seatback. A nearby flight attendant, seeing this, tried to pull him back. But the pressure difference was too great. In the end, both couldn't escape their fate. Meanwhile, the powerless plane rapidly descended. The passengers inside could only say their final prayers. Following with a deafening crash, the plane plunged into the ocean. As the passengers, who fastened their seatbelts, felt relieved for narrowly escaping death, the plane suddenly began to descend at a sharp 45-degree angle. Seawater started flooding the cabin incessantly. The plane was heading rapidly towards the seabed. Luckily, it hit a rock, causing the descending plane to come to a halt. The inflow of water into the cabin stopped as well. The oxygen in the cramped space could be depleted at any moment. So the few surviving passengers nervously held their breaths as they felt fortunate to be seated in the back, thus escaping immediate danger. A knocking sound suddenly came from the water ahead. Then, a little girl emerged from the frigid water. Following closely behind her were the girl's butler and her unconscious grandmother. The three of them were the only survivors from first class. The flight attendant, seeing this, immediately rushed forward to perform CPR on the unconscious grandmother. He began performing chest compressions. Thanks to the timely resuscitation, the elderly lady quickly regained consciousness. Now, only 7 survivors remained on the entire plane. However, John, the butler, was the most level-headed among them. He suggested that in this completely sealed space, to survive until the rescue team arrived, they must conserve the limited oxygen remaining in the cabin. But just then, Anna took out her phone, trying to call for help. But she soon realized that deep underwater, there was no cell signal to be found. However, the flight attendant assured them that when the plane crashed, it had already sent a distress signal to the tower. If the plane's whereabouts were not found, the headquarters would immediately send out a search and rescue team. As everyone questioned the flight attendant's statement, John, a former aircraft mechanic, confirmed the flight attendant's claim as true. He also mentioned that in the rear cabin of the plane, there should be spare oxygen tanks. The flight attendant, upon reaching the rear cabin, quickly found 2 oxygen tanks, but to their dismay, both were empty. The airline, in an effort to cut costs, had put empty tanks just to pass inspections. Frustrated, John felt an overwhelming urge to. At this moment, the grandmother beside them said she noticed that someone next to her had an oxygen tank. It might be a solution to their urgent problem, to save everyone. John immediately took off his jacket without hesitation and dove into the water. However, he did not know a greater crisis was silently approaching him. At this time, he was surrounded by floating disaster victims. John finally made it to the first-class cabin and quickly found the passenger the grandmother had mentioned. He hastily grabbed the oxygen tank and immediately headed back. Unfortunately, at this moment, a shark with a gaping mouth rushed toward John quickly, facing the shark's bite. John desperately struggled. The surface of the safety zone stirred with splashes, in waves of water splashes, while everyone was unaware of what was happening. John suddenly burst out of the water and immediately handed over the oxygen tank. As Anna was about to pull him up, John pushed Anna away, because he knew once the shark targeted him, there was no chance of survival. To give others a chance to survive, he didn't want to waste the precious oxygen. John encouraged Anna to keep everyone alive. Just as he finished speaking, John was pulled down by the shark in the water. Everyone present was stunned by the scene before them. To avoid the shark suddenly attacking, everyone began to retreat to the back of the cabin. But this place was not secure. The strong pressure of the seawater made the cabin walls creak and groan. everyone was so scared they didn't dare to breathe, fearing the plane would suffer a catastrophic failure from the pressure, and the oxygen in the cabin was rapidly depleting. However, the steward remembered the oxygen tanks John had found. He immediately opened the valve to fill the cabin with oxygen. This way, they could buy more time for rescue. The sudden impact of the shark caused a huge noise throughout the cabin. Anna's boyfriend, who had an engineering degree, immediately said, "The plane has a strong composite material exterior. Such pressure and impact, the plane can withstand it. If the plane sinks again, the outcome would be uncertain." Nick's mouth was like it was illuminated. Just as he finished speaking, the plane began to sink down the slope again. Fortunately, it stopped just as it reached the cliff. At this moment, Anna also noticed. The plane's tilt was even steeper than before. If they just sat and waited, they would face certain death, because no one knew when the plane might sink again, and the sharks outside were watching them closely. Escaping through diving was also unrealistic, as everyone was at a loss. The little girl suddenly said that her teacher once taught her sharks are most afraid of bubbles. However, it was this seemingly insignificant statement that ultimately saved several lives. At this point, Jack said, when he was checking the luggage, he noticed a passenger had brought a complete set of diving gear. As long as they could find that suitcase, they might have a chance to survive. However, the steward beside them immediately poured cold water on Jack's idea, because according to aviation regulations, oxygen tanks must be completely empty before boarding. But Jack said, "We can use these small air bags to refill it." Everyone present was unsure if Jack's suggestion was feasible. "But I know they probably haven't graduated from elementary school." At this moment, the headquarters received a distress signal from the plane, and immediately dispatched a rescue helicopter to conduct a thorough search and rescue operation at the site. They quickly pinpointed the plane's exact location through the black box signal, and located the plane's exact position, and discovered the precariously hanging plane at the cliff. At this time, the passengers in the cabin saw the rescuers through the portholes. They were extremely happy, and excitedly waved their arms, furiously waving their arms, fearing they might miss the chance for rescue. However, the divers did not know the danger approaching from behind, so Anna kept signaling to warn them of the situation behind. But when she turned around to check, she found nothing unusual. Even the professional rescue team couldn't escape the shark's gaping mouth. Their hopes for rescue were shattered again. Watching the seawater continue to flood into the cabin, they couldn't just sit and wait for death. And at this point, the cabin's oxygen was rapidly depleting, and there was no knowing if the plane would sink again. At this moment, Lisa said, the oxygen tanks of the Eaton rescue personnel must be nearby. If they could find them, they could survive for a longer time. After saying that, Anna immediately dove into the water. Nick, to encourage his girlfriend, decisively climbed onto the seats. Through Anna's careful observation, he vaguely spotted the diver's blurry traces as he was telling everyone about his discovery. Nick accidentally fell into the water from the seat. As everyone thought, Nick's mishap was not funny. The shark in the water suddenly bit into his thigh. A few people combined their efforts and pulled Nick from the shark's mouth. Although his life was saved, it came at the cost of one of his legs. The grandmother, who had medical experience, immediately took measures to stop the bleeding. With everyone's combined efforts, Nick's condition was quickly stabilized. This was when Anna remembered what Nick had said before, and decided to find the passengers' diving equipment, so the steward opened the cargo hold door. Anna, with the flashlight, immediately climbed inside. She followed the luggage, and quickly found the green package inside. There were only 4 sets of diving gear. But there were now 5 people. Fortunately, Nick, due to his severe injuries, ultimately did not survive. At this moment, the plane again began to slide and sink, and due to the excessive pressure, it had already exceeded the plane's limit. The nose of the plane instantly fractured. Now, the time left for them was running out to escape from here. Anna decided to try the method the little girl mentioned during their escape. using small air bags to create bubbles to scare off the sharks. So she first needed to find the oxygen tanks left by the divers. So all of them donned their gear and began their descent, but at this crucial moment, the grandmother refused to leave. She didn't want her partner to be left alone here. She decided to stay and rest with him. Meanwhile, Anna, with the little girl, swam deeper. Just then, a large shark suddenly swam towards them. In a critical moment, Anna quickly activated the small air bag. A large number of bubbles burst out instantly. Unexpectedly, the shark was indeed scared away. Jack, seeing this, hurriedly swam back. He was completely terrified by what he had just witnessed. He dared not swim any further. Little did he know, a powerful force pushed him underwater. When he came to his senses, it was already too late. The steward, seeing this, was so frightened he turned and ran. Meanwhile, Anna and the little girl had also found the diver. They quickly pulled out the air valve and took a couple of breaths. At this moment, the steward swam from the rear cabin. They quickly prepared their gear and gave the diver's equipment to the steward. Then they opened the little girl's life jacket valve. The inflated life jacket immediately dragged the steward and the little girl towards the surface. But when Anna was about to follow, the fierce shark reappeared in front of her. Anna tried to use the life jacket to quickly ascend. But unfortunately, the valve seemed to be malfunctioning and wouldn't work properly at this moment. The shark was only 20 centimeters away from her. However, Anna, without any wounds, did not attract the shark's attention and swam towards the diver. Anna hurriedly swam towards the fractured nose of the plane, but the plane began to sink again. The strong current pulled her in the opposite direction. To escape, she could only use the seat backs to inch her way towards the exit. Just as the plane fell into the abyss, she finally swam out. However, another challenge awaited her. She swam with all her might towards the surface, but the journey was too far. Anna, whose body had reached its limit, could no longer hold on and let out her last breath. However, the life jacket still pulled her unconscious body out of the water. After a long time, Anna finally woke up from her unconsciousness. She immediately looked for the girl and steward who had surfaced earlier, but only found the girl's doll nearby. At this moment, two rescue helicopters spotted Anna and then threw down rescue ropes to pull Anna up. At this moment, a large hand suddenly reached out to her. The person was the steward, the 200 passengers on the plane. In the end, only Anna, the steward and the little girl survived.